Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. Market rundown with Chip Nellinger. Chip, it's Sunday night here. Markets have opened up here for the overnights, and we are pretty much underway for the week. Not a lot going on. Still waiting for the Trump-China thing to take place, be head of the G20 summit down there in Argentina. But other than that, markets are pretty quiet.
It really is. Corn is just dead in the water here. Can't do anything. Pretty disappointing trade in corn the last week to 10 days here, in spite of corn yields going lower and carryout dropping. You know, we had that big revision higher in world corn carryout due to the China census that they took and kind of affected ending stocks in the world. And so corn's just dead in the water here. It's really a disappointing trade in corn. Beans looked like they were about to fall out of bed last week on Friday. And then there were some comments from President Trump about, really positive spin on this China trade issue, that they want to make a deal, that it's going to be good, we're ready to roll. And that really reversed beans like 12, 13 cents off the lows from Friday. And we actually closed higher on the week. And, kind of kicked off the Sunday night trade with a whimper here. Corn up just a touch, beans and wheat lower. Coming into a pretty quiet week. It's already kind of holiday mode here. The volumes are pretty light. We've got a normal close Wednesday, no markets Thursday, obviously. We reopen Friday morning, and then it will be an early close Friday. I believe 12:05 the markets close Central Time. It might be 12:15 for the grains, 12:05 for the livestock on Friday. Historically and seasonally, the week of Thanksgiving is usually pretty good for beans, especially the day before. I don't know that there's any real good reason for that, but high tendency for beans, especially on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, to close higher, and then a pretty strong tendency on the Friday after Thanksgiving. We can combine some better optimism on something getting done with this China trade thing. Beans could have a nice week. The funds are short a fair amount on beans. I think about 50,000 contracts roughly. And with these trade talks coming up here pretty rapidly, it is probably not a stretch to think that maybe the funds are going to get out of some short positions. Why take the risk of a surprise agreement and a big rally in beans? So the fact that they likely have some contracts to get out of could produce some buying. So, fingers crossed, we could see a decent week in beans. The wheat market has a lot going for it, but it's disappointing trade too. We can't seem to get much going there. Problems in Argentina, or I should say Australia, with production. Argentina, they're coming into harvest here, pretty critical time frame for wheat production. And getting too much rain there at a time when in that productive cycle, wheat doesn't like a lot of moisture, and they're getting a lot of rain. We've got problems in the plains. There's going to be acreage cutback in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, just too much rain and snow. And wheat can't do anything. We've got some big tenders coming up here. We got a Saudi Arabia tender. They're in for a big amount. I don't know what it is, like 450,000 tons. And the market's waiting to see how much business the United States is going to get from that. It'll be an indication of how much available supplies are in the rest of the world, particularly the Black Sea area and Ukraine. And if we can get a big chunk of that, I think it will give the market optimism that we're going to start getting better exports, and we could rally. So that's supposed to be early this week, possibly as early as tomorrow. And then Egypt set rumored to be in for a big tender coming up as well. So those two will be very important for the wheat market. Corn right now is just a follower, unfortunately. But we'll see. I don't think that there's probably a lot of downside in these markets in the short run. But, without a China trade agreement, there may not be much upside either. So we may just be stuck in the mud here, going sideways until we know more about this China trade issue.
Right. So the acres in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, where they've had a significant amount of rain, significant amount of snow. I mean, just one harvest delay after harvest delay, or planting delay after planting delay. What do you think those acres are going to go into? Do you feel like there's a corn and soybean bump there, or maybe cotton's going to come in to pick up some of those acres? What are you thinking on those acres that are going to get planted to wheat?
Yeah, I think cotton would probably be high on the list. Potentially corn as well. I think cotton and corn probably would pick up the bulk of those acres that get switched. Cotton's probably maybe a little bit of a winner at this point as you look at profitability on paper. Mm-hmm. So that's a good question, and we're late enough now. You got farmers saying, "Yeah, I'm gonna." Even if a window does open up, it's too late to plant. There's still some guys fighting it, trying to put some acres in the ground, but it's getting late enough in the game that it may kind of just be what it is at this point on wheat. And we'll get that final planted acreage number on the January crop report right after the first of the year. So that'll be important to see where that number comes out. That could be a big markup mover. So that's 60 days away roughly. We'll get that wheat acreage number.
Right on. So let's talk about the protein complex a little bit. The cattle market's kind of been hit and miss, but it's kind of stagnant here with the reactions it's had to the stock market with its up and downs and ebbs and flows here. We've seen pretty big swings in that area over the last 2 or 3 weeks. So where do you see the cattle market and the overall livestock market, for that matter, kind of headed for this week?
Yeah, cattle have struggled here. They're down near the low end of the range for the last 3 or 4 weeks in here, but they're at good support areas. Post Thanksgiving, you can talk about better things, maybe a little better demand. So it would be nice to see the cattle market respond higher here. It's going to take higher cash trade to do that. But I think one thing that's hurt us is this crude oil drop. And the stock market has really taken it on the chin here recently as well. Crude oil has just had a massive slide, probably a historic, one of the biggest moves lower that we've ever had in the crude oil market, $20-some in a short amount of time. And that hasn't helped any of our agricultural markets. The crude oil market's kind of a bellwether for inflation, and it's had such a big drop that it's really been a little bit of a headwind against all of our ag markets. So, and combine that with some down moves in the stock market, and it's been a real struggle here for cattle. But I do think as you get into the end of the year here, the next few weeks, and January, February, we can see some better things in cattle. The bright spot is we haven't had a lot of positive news. These outside markets have been affecting cattle and hogs to a lesser extent, and we are lower, but we're holding it together and have found some good support here. So had a nice little bump higher in the hog market into the week. No real news there. This swine flu issue is not going away. Kind of right back in the middle of a big range we've been in for a few months here in the hog market. So we need a spark. It's like all our ag markets are just pretty quiet right now, lacking some good news to break us out of the range and push these markets higher. So hopefully we can get a spark here going into the end of the year.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that the hog market for a minute. There has been, the swine flu thing flares up for a minute and then it gets kind of disappears for a little while, then it flares back up. What's the overall feel for that right now? I mean, are guys more concerned about that than we're hearing about in the marketplace, or is it just kind of as a new piece of information breaks into the market that kind of flares things back up?
Yeah, more like you said, we just see quiets down for a couple weeks and then you get another story that flares up. It's not going away, and it's definitely affecting Chinese production. We know that's a fact, and so that China is such a big player that it just doesn't seem to go away. But it's not something that's an immediate supportive factor every day and every hour that the market's open. So it's just kind of something there in the back of traders' minds that they know, hey, we've maybe got some issues here in Chinese production going lower. And also these China trade talks coming, right? I mean, the market's focused and highly sensitive on soybeans, but pork and to a lesser extent beef and maybe even corn could be included in any type of trade agreement we get to China. So I think the hog market definitely has one eye on these upcoming talks, and it could be very important for the hog market if you get, especially combined with this, this health issue they're having, this swine flu issue, cutting their production back. Wouldn't be a stretch to think they're going to take, some U.S. pork as well. And so I think there's some optimism there, and that might be one of the reasons we saw a little bump higher in the hog market going into the end of the week. Just short covering, kind of like the bean market. Who wants to be short that? Nobody wants to press the short side of the market when you've got this potentially massively supportive thing. It just overnight, snap of a finger, that thing could change. And if we get an agreement, it's an entirely different market scenario. So, that could spur some additional buying as funds and speculative traders get out of their short positions ahead of these meetings. And hopefully that can be something that pushes us higher in the hog market and also beans as well.
Yeah. So last question here. So let's talk about Brazil for a second. So Brazil's had a pretty good start to their growing season. January, February, they'll be harvesting beans, and everything that I've read and everything that I could find shows that there's some pretty good optimism about a pretty big crop coming out of Brazil this year with soybeans. How do you think that'll play into guys looking at 2019 crop mix and those kind of things, and how do you think that's going to play into that decision-making process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely off to a good start in Brazil, and to a lesser extent Argentina. They've had some areas have had too much rain in Argentina, but Brazil seems pretty good shape right now and really got in early to plant. So they'll start having beans like as early as late January out of Brazil. I see the bean market as being the biggest issue, the biggest potential bearish market going forward, because we've got a big carryout here and a big crop. If the southern hemisphere bounces back with normal production, our world carryout is just going to be too big. So that's going to be a real wild card. I don't know how acreage plays out. You've got the banker involved. You've got, cash flow and finances are going to be part of that. Inputs are going higher in corn. So at face value and on paper, you'd expect that maybe corn could pick some acres up, but it's not as clear cut as you would think. These tariff payments that we've got are going to hold gross revenue together on the beans this year for guys. So maybe we don't see as big a switch out of beans into corn. That really, typically you get the January crop report out of the way and the market looks ahead and starts fighting out and kind of estimating where acreage is going to be. So that might be a little bit ahead of us, but it's really something that needs to be on the radar screen. We were knocked on the door at 950 November 19 soybean futures earlier this week. That needs a really close look, in our opinion, from producers to maybe start making some sales, doing some option strategies that would lock a floor in, because even with a Chinese agreement, let's say we get an agreement, they take some more beans. Let's say they pick up 150 million bushels of demand that was, not expected. It still means that we're going to have a 750, 800-ish million bushel carryout. That's way too big. And then if South America comes back with big production, there's too many beans in the world here. And so beans really are the weak link in the grain market going forward. And, up here, if they happen to push higher than 950, there's a lot of resistance up in the low 960s to about 970. So about 20 cents roughly higher than where we closed Friday, 22, 25 cents, something like that. You really got to take a look at that as a producer and say, if nothing changes and we bounce back with normal production, even if we plant 1.5 million, 2 million less acres, we got too many beans in the world, and it doesn't support $9.50 new crop beans, it probably is something like an $8 number, and that really is going to be a drag on our grain markets here. So great point, and it's never too soon to be looking at that and having your plan in place. I know guys are really kind of up against the wall a little bit. It's been a rough fall, rain, snow, still crop in the field work that needs done, and guys guys aren't necessarily focused on the markets right now, but they really need to be. And especially $9.50 beans really need a close look, in our opinion.
All right, Chip. Well, just like you talked about there, a plan is always important, whether you're no matter where you're at and going through the end of the year, especially whether you're talking about tax planning or even your market planning and even moving into 2019. So if guys want to talk about a plan and how they would either make their plan they have better or just have you look over one they have, how would they do that?
Yeah, best way is just call our office, 309-550-7213. We'd love to chat with you. No pressure at all. Just give you a few pieces of advice and ask you some questions on what you're currently doing and give you our opinion on how you might be able to better implement that. So just call us, 309-550-7213.
All right, Chip. Well, Chip, we will talk to you again on Tuesday, so don't eat any turkey yet. Wait a minute. Just wait a couple days and you jump in on that turkey as soon as you can. And then
I'll be ready. Ready for turkey, ready for the Bears. They're dominating tonight and they're going to dominate again Thursday.
Well, they got to dominate sooner or later. It has to happen to somebody.
It's their year. It's their year.
That's the funniest thing I've heard all night, Chip. All right, Chip. Hey, well, this is the Moving Iron Podcast, now part of the Global Ag Network, so check it out at globalagnetwork.com, and there'll be more information coming. So, Chip, we'll talk to you Tuesday, and best of luck to your Bears.
Yeah, all right. We'll talk to you Tuesday.
Have a good one, buddy.
See you.